Visionary leadership is the well-being of the people. When persons of easy values and little dreams are in the saddle, you know what they do? They affect their people with violence and underdevelopment. That they are consumed by lust, pleasure, and excitement, that they are plagues of poverty and depression. The program is State Affairs. I am Edmund Opilo. That they spend their times in chase of recognition and are bogged down by impulses and emotions drags society to the doldrums. By the nature of their leadership, they lack the knowledge of principles that give balance, stability, and influence to the people. Hello. Redemption comes when people in search of peace, justice, and progress hold on to kind aspirations, and they choose for themselves leaders skilled in the ideals of effective leadership. Hold this as an infallible truth. Welcome to this class of politics, history, and power. We've been off this class for some time, especially from this studio. But we are back. What are we looking at today? I've entitled it Doom, an Undeclared Civil War. What does it mean? Let's take it from this angle. In a May 11th, 2022 interview published by the Vanguard newspaper, Chief Olufalaye, former secretary to the government of the Federation, assessed the security situation in Nigeria, and he came out with the verdict that Nigeria is at war. Is Nigeria at war? Olufalaye's conclusion is not strange. What he did was to re-echo a popular opinion in the public space since the days of the Jonathan government. But what makes Falaye's assertion interesting is his declaration that the war in question is an undeclared civil war ravaging the northern part of Nigeria. Since it's an undeclared resistance to the authority of the state, can it be said that the Nigerian state recognizes that it is a war? Remember Russia. At the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russia frowned at its intervention being called a war. Russia calls it a special military operation, and Russia has gone to the extent of restricting certain international media outfits access to Russia to enforce its narrative. Falaye says, in the case of Nigeria, the government calls it security challenges. If it is mere security challenges, he wonders why the state is spending billions of naira buying Cobra helicopters, buying jets that were invented by Americans for war purposes. According to Falaye in the Vanguard interview, we are deceiving ourselves in Nigeria when we play down the enormity of the unimaginable violence unraveling in the northern part of Nigeria. The 1999 presidential candidate of ADAPP alliance fears that Nigeria may descend into anarchy, a situation where there is breakdown of law and order. Falaye granted that interview during Buhari's time in 2022. Has anything changed in Tinubu's time? Will Falaye repeat his assertion in Tinubu's time? Those are not the questions I want to answer on this edition of State Affairs. Still looking at the Falaye interview. He paints the picture. Let me quote from the interview. If you are stronger than your neighbor, you grab his property, his wife, whatever you want from him, you kill him, do whatever you like with him and move on. That is anarchy, which we don't pray to have in Nigeria. In other words, every man to himself and God for all. That is Falaye. In the interview, he had doubts that any sensible election would take place in 2023 under an atmosphere of entrenched violence. So let me ask, was the 2023 presidential election a sensible election? Falaye calls for broad redefinition of the terms of the Nigerian Constitution. He asserts that doing this is not a function of the National Assembly, but a responsibility of a constituent assembly empowered by the mandate of the Nigerian people. He says such a constitution should be similar to that of the post-independence Nigeria. According to Falaye, failure to make this intervention at this critical time would spell doom for the Nigerian state. So that doom is the idea I want to explore on this edition of State Affairs. What is doom? An undeclared civil war. Are you there? I welcome you again to this class of politics, history, and power, coming to you from State Affairs Studio. So what is doom? What do you understand by doom? Doom can mean millions of out-of-school children roaming the street. That is doom. Doom is evident in the lives of millions of unemployed youths whose minds have become the devil's workshop. To be doomed is to harbor a leadership class emboldened to break and undermine the law while being protected by agencies meant to uphold the law. Last month, a young man identified as Yunusa Usman was beaten to death by an irate mob in Ningi Local Council of Bauchi State. What was his offense? He was alleged to have made blasphemous comments. Yunusa was slain after an argument about a religious sect. Eyewitnesses said Yunusa was attacked and killed after an argument went sour with his friend. Look at how an eyewitness described what happened. He says the victim was a member of Fairai Islamic sect. He was heard to have spoken words of insult to the Prophet. Some young men challenged Yunusa to withdraw his statement, but he insisted he would not. He even repeated it. That was when they started beating him. The eyewitness said that some police personnel tried as much as possible to save Yunusa, but they were overpowered by the mob, which used stones, sticks, and other dangerous things to hit him until he died. That is doom. That is a war against the mind. And it is an undeclared war. In a state facing the doomsday, students in a college of education became convinced that the best response to different religious belief or provocation is to lynch Deborah Samuel to death and burn her to ashes. You remember that story? Such behavior can only lead the state to a dead end if not checked. It is a war against the mind. That it happened in Sokoto State College of Education raises questions about the quality of education the mob receive. They are only a representation of the commanding mindset holding down the progress of Nigeria. Those who killed Deborah 3 years ago celebrated it openly. They are not different from the political leaders who steal funds meant for health care, leading to the unavoidable death of Nigerians in various hospitals. That is for those who are even lucky to get to the hospital. In fact, those who steal funds meant for the development of the education sector are more dangerous than those that mobbed Deborah and Yunusa. For those who unleashed that bloody orgy are the product of the actions of those who embezzle funds meant for education. It might express itself in religious fanaticism, but its roots is in leadership decadence. Do not forget, religion is like an opium. It intoxicates. That is the reason it can be a great tool of mobilization for progress. But where the mindset is narrow, it leads to destruction and underdevelopment. This is the reason the Renaissance and the Enlightenment in Europe gave the continent the opportunity to appraise the state's entanglement with the church and then worked towards the state operating on grounds of reason. It was the age of relentless innovation, as Europe wore new lenses to see things as they really are. It was the age of discovery and possibilities. It is a consequence of the search for new knowledge. The search for new knowledge. Are we searching for new knowledge in Nigeria? If we are searching for new knowledge, how come previous governments are always better than the ones after them? If we are searching for knowledge, how valuable are the knowledge that we discover? How come our education system is getting more comatose by the day? The search for knowledge that led to the enlightenment in Europe is such that gives momentum and vitality to the totality of our works, leading to exceptional achievement. I'm making reference to Western civilization here. Western civilization was lifted to the height of empirical development, and it has not depreciated. With the Renaissance that began in the early 14th century and lasted till the beginning of the 17th century, Europe ended the medieval age and began modern-day inquiry. One of the goals of state affairs, and a major goal for that, is mental revolution. That is the goal of this show. From our research, we concluded that mental poverty is the biggest problem of Africa. Corruption is a function of mental poverty. The unending insurrections in African states are functions of mental poverty. When somebody cuts away billions meant for development, take it back to Europe for safekeeping in European banks, comes home and goes to borrow billions from the same Europeans and begin to pay interest to the same Europeans, it is mental poverty. Because it is clear, they've given you loans from the money you stole and kept with them, and you are not paying interest to them. It is mental poverty. It is mental poverty. It is mental poverty to leave billions of your people in poverty when they can live in comfort from the resources in their land. Mental poverty is doom, and state affairs is fighting mental poverty. That is our main objective. With the Renaissance and Enlightenment, Europe conquered mental poverty. I have done a full edition on the Renaissance in Europe. If you go on my pages and you scroll down on YouTube, you would find that edition. The period I'm talking about saw the confrontation of supernatural and theological beliefs. Because of the knowledge that came with it, Renaissance artists regarded the Middle Ages before it as Dark Ages. Where mental poverty is intense, the people are in the dark ages. That is why there is no progress. Perhaps African societies still live in dark shadows in the age of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We might be exposed to higher education and new technologies, but our worldview remains choked by extreme irrational behaviors. The reason no African society has attained advanced status. Some might want to mention South Africa, but let's not go there at the moment. With the death of Yunusa recently over blasphemy, and the death of Deborah in Sokoto 3 years ago over the same offense, and the death of many others on grounds of religion, culture, and politics, the classical book of Chief Areoye Oyebola of blessed memory, entitled The Black Man's Dilemma, comes to mind. I want to read from the book Black Man's Dilemma. Chief Areoye Oyebola died at the age of 84. He was my friend. He was one elderly Nigerian I always wanted to sit down with. He was a renowned journalist, a one-time editor of the Daily Times. He contested to be the governor of Oyo State at some point. I can comfortably say that Areoye Oyebola was a deep intellectual. During the different private discussions we had, I saw a man who reflected deeply on Africa's underdevelopment. It made him cry. There are some of his views I don't agree with, but my respect for him is such that inspires me. I want to read from page 38 of his book, Black Man's Dilemma. It's a book I always recommend to anyone who wants a strong view on Africa's underdevelopment. I want to read from page 38 of the book. He says, I believe that our morale will be meaningfully boosted if we admit that our achievements were modest in the past. He wants us to strive hard for great achievements now and the future. He says black intelligentsias merely want to go beyond the black man's misery of today to discover a past of glory, grandeur, and beauty. I'm still reading from Areoye's book. Let me repeat this part. Black intelligentsias merely want to go beyond the black man's misery of today to discover a past of glory, grandeur, and beauty. But let's make no mistake about it. There was not much to be proud of in our past. Areoye says we are exaggerating our past achievement, while the overwhelming majority of blacks all over the world heirs to the Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mali, Bornu, Songhai, Fulani, Yoruba, and Bini civilizations have no access to basic essentials of modern living. He continues that they are today underfed and illiterate. They are in poor health, and our present backwardness reflects yesterday's backwardness. That's Areoye Bola there. Look at the book. That's the book I'm reading from. Black Man's Dilemma. It's one of the classics from African intellectuals. Areoye says, all talks about our past greatness are myth. They are empty dreams, and it is a vain hope to think that myth are a substitute for the great strength which the black race must today call forth for its rapid breakthrough to modernity, our lack of a worthwhile past notwithstanding. Some say colonialism has distorted our great past. Areoye says, but if ours was a solid past, like that of the other races, it would have been indestructible. You know, when he made that argument, I took him up privately. But if you look at it again, I think he's making a solid argument. I'll take you to the interview I had with him. Just get ready to listen. But I just want to read this again before I play the interview. Some say colonialism has distorted our great past. But if ours was a solid past, like that of the other races, it would have been indestructible. You know, the Chinese past at some point was shaken, but it was indestructible. I mean, the colonialists could not. India, that's the argument Areoye Bola makes in this book, because he traveled to different parts of the world to make his conclusion. If you read this book, you see the depth of research that went into its writing. Black Man's Dilemma by Chief Areoye Oyebola. You will get this book on udarabooks.com. On udarabooks.com. You get your copy on udarabooks.com. And you can also get it on WhatsApp. We'll be flashing our WhatsApp numbers on the screen as we go. Contact us if you need a copy of this book. Now let me bring Areoye Oyebola on State Affairs. Remember, doom, an undeclared civil war, is a war of the mind.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
In 1976, you wrote the book, Black Man's Dilemma.
Yes.
Why did you write the book?
Its origin was dated back to a longer period. I wrote the book, I started thinking about it when I was an undergraduate at the then University College Ibadan, which is now University of Ibadan. We were very comfortable as students, we were few. We had stewards at our beck and call. We had good food, we have everything to ourselves. And we were served by stewards. I just looked around my room one day and said, I saw a raffia mat painted in 6 colors. And I said, which of these colors can the black man make? I can't get. The only one I can think of was a yellowish one. If you put on raffia and you put ash, I say, why? I started asking, why did we? Because Britain and Europe very cold. Why is it that they brought to us here air conditioner, fans? When they were not satisfied, they brought air conditioners. What have we invented? And again, I thought to myself, if they didn't bring steam engine, ship driven with steam engine, how will we get there with our canoe? I started thinking that, and why are we down in our own home? Down, those that are taken to slavery, America, Brazil, and so on, why are we the underdog? I started thinking of whether something is wrong with the black race. I was thinking seriously about this until I got an opportunity as a journalist to become an assistant editor of Sunday Times. Mr. Sam Amuka was my editor. I was his assistant. And I showed him the synopsis of the book. And I requested he should publish it in the Sunday Times.
So it was the pain of Africa, the lack of innovation. That triggered.
Yes. I kept asking, where were our own ancestors when they were moving ahead? And it became more painful to me when I knew how the white came to South Africa. And it turned into a place flowing with milk and honey.
Basically, you blame the black man for its own dilemma.
Yes, I blame him.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
You know, whenever I listen to that interview, I reflect on human nature. And I think if you reflect on human nature, you should ask a lot of questions. So I've decided to bring you this book, The Laws of Human Nature, by Robert Greene. Yes, this book, The Laws of Human Nature, by Robert Greene. There are conflicts of thought here, but I give it to Robert Greene. Africans must begin to study human nature at this point. The kind of leadership African states continue to produce demands that Africans, beyond anger, must now begin to engage in deeper reflection of why we are who we are. You know, the story of most African states are the same, just that some are worse off. If you read The Laws of Human Nature, it is historical. It gives you a historical account of different persons who have been able to change the world, their flaws, their understanding of politics, their understanding of business. Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Nature. He says you are about to become an apprentice in human nature. He says the laws will work to transform you into a calmer and more strategic observer of people, helping to free you from all the emotional drama that needlessly drains you. He said the laws will make you a master interpreter of the cues that people continually emit, giving you a much greater ability to judge their character. Third, the laws will empower you to take on and outthink the toxic types of who inevitably cross your path. Yes, it's more about one-on-one, but I'm recommending it because we need to have that understanding to be able to understand our environment, because the person makes the environment. You can get this book on udarabooks.com, or through our WhatsApp numbers that we are flashing on the screen. Areoye has reflected. He's the author of the book Black Man's Dilemma, a classic. Let me take it further. We need an intellectual movement to bring about new learning. Now I'm talking about intellectual curiosity and criticism. Our knowledge systems have not done us enough good. And when I talk about knowledge systems, political parties are knowledge systems. Institutions of the states are knowledge systems. The church and the mosque are knowledge systems. Our traditional institutions, our families, are knowledge systems. And I make the point that these systems have not done us enough good. We need to reform them. We need to rethink them, our worldviews. It is time for the rebirth of certain religious, cultural, political, and economic knowledge, ties, and values. Belief systems that consume human freedom and creativity. This is where the questions of redemptive values come to mind. And when I talk about redemptive values, 2017, I brought it closer to Kuka's system. Kuka's system is the church. If you listened to me on Saturday, you would discover that I spoke with some Dominican brothers. I chose them because of the depth of knowledge they go through to become Reverend Fathers, because I've studied it. I see they are loaded with philosophical knowledge. The books they read, I've gone into their library. They read classic, so I felt I could engage their minds. You can listen to that tradition on the page on YouTube. The page you are listening to me now, just scroll down, you'll see it. My discussion with the Dominican brothers. We're talking about moral decadence and leadership. So in 2017, I sat down with Bishop Matthew Kuka of the Sokoto Catholic Diocese to discuss this question of redemptive values. And it is one interview I will continue to play and play and play. Reverend Matthew Kuka on State Affairs.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
And if we don't arrive at that point,
we will continue to go around in circles, because the world is driven by ideas. Okay? And unless you have people with enough intellectual capacity to point at a different vision, people will get to a situation in which the slave becomes comfortable with his chains. And the result is apathy. The flip side of that is the kind of dubious religiosity that you now find in Nigeria.
Did you say dubious religiosity?
Absolutely, in which everything has now been left in the hands of God. As if Nigerians have collectively outsourced their responsibilities.
I'm talking to a bishop here.
You're talking to a bishop, and actually my responsibility, of course, is to be happy that the church is growing or that religion is growing. But religion in its present shape and form in Nigeria has become a liability, in the sense that it has lost its redemptive capacity. it has lost its ability to ask the difficult questions. Because when you have a religion where we religious people are supposedly competing and angling with those who want political power and with those who want economic power, when you have churches where people are defining themselves and their relevance by the sizes of cars that they are driving, and that churchmen are having celebrations, and we are faced with a situation in which parishioners are giving you state-of-the-art sports cars and state-of-the-art vehicles, and defining all these in material terms, clearly religion has lost its redemptive value. Because if we were serious, communism did it after 50 years. It was not the fire. So the inability of the Nigerian church to confront the demon of governance in all its viciousness and its inability to respond to the problems of...
You see, Kuka's position is a product of his experience. His definition of the church also captures the character of the larger society, be it educational, health, economic, or political. And we will pay dearly for this mindset that continues to hold us down. No wonder Kuka deployed his 2022 Easter message as a tool for redemptive awakening. So one point you should take away from this class is that the character of leadership also determines the behavior of the larger population. In fact, it is a major determinant. That is why the kind of leaders you get tells you the condition of the land. You don't need to go too deep. And that is one theory we have pushed on state affairs, that the character of leadership, especially political leadership, at any time is the dominant character of the state. So the corruption you see in Nigeria, the violence you see in Nigeria, the underdevelopment speaks so loudly of the mindset of the leaders of Nigeria. That is it. So if things are not improving, if poverty is rising, if economic hardship is rising, it is the reflection of the character of the leaders of the state. Look at this. I haven't talked about the character of the leadership. In 2014, I spoke with Pastor Yemi Oshibajo, or Professor Yemi Oshibajo. You know, in 2014, he was picked as the running mate, or he was suggested as the running mate of Muhammadu Buhari. So I went to see him in his law chamber. I wanted to know the character of the man he's running with on the flag of the APC. They were on the same presidential ticket. So I wanted to know if Buhari was a fanatic. Because if you have a fanatical leader, especially as president, the country is in trouble. Perhaps what happened in Buhari's 8-year tenure has taught us that lesson. So I want to go back to 2014 so that we can reflect on that discourse with Yemi Oshibajo before he became the vice president of Nigeria.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Buhari have been accused of many wrong things, and one is religious fundamentalism.
Yes.
And some are saying Buhari is on one extreme, Pastor Yemi Oshibanjo is on the other extreme. Are you a Christian fundamentalist?
Let me put it this way, and I think I should answer the first part of that question. And the first part of that question is that As you know, and many of us know that in recent history, Buhari has been head of state of this country. When he was head of state, his deputy was Idiagbon, General Idiagbon. Both of them were Muslims. In that administration, and during the course of that administration, in fact, up until the past 2-3 years or so, nobody ever described General Buhari as an Islamic fundamentalist. When he was in office, he had a chance to join the OIC. He didn't, despite the fact that he was supreme commander. As you know, in those days, I mean, the head of state did what he liked. He refused to join the OIC. And here was a Muslim with a Muslim deputy. General Buhari was also the same person who put down the first major Islamic insurgency in this country, Maitatsine. He took command himself, and he put down that religious insurgency. And his simple reason, because all of these issues, of course, are in the press. I've also had several discussions with him. His simple reason is that you cannot have two centers of power in a country. You must have one. The business of government is law and order. The business of government is ensuring law and order. When there is no law and order, government has no place whatsoever, and it's also the business of government to ensure that there is security of lives and property. So he set out to ensure that that would not happen. And that's his reaction even to this Boko Haram insurgency and all of that. That there must be, that government must take responsibility for it, rather than hide under all sorts of cloaks and say, oh, it's the opposition that is responsible for Boko Haram. How does anyone say something that is so utterly without foundation and so utterly false, that General Buhari is an Islamist? How come? When did he become an Islamist? He will tell you, General Buhari will tell you, and I'm sure the evidence will show, that even when he was head of state, the vast majority of members of his cabinet were Christians. I'm sure you've come across some of this information. And when he was head of state, the vast majority of those he appointed. And in those days, when you're a military head of state, you appoint your commissioners, you appoint your ministers. It's unlike now, where state governments send nominations of ministers. He appointed the ministers himself. And in appointing those ministers, he appointed mostly Christians, as you can see from the list of those who served under him. How do you describe a guy like that as Islamist? Clearly, General Buhari is not in any sense an Islamist. He's not a fundamentalist of any kind. And there's nothing that supports that point of view. This is the PDP's propaganda, and this is just, and they've made good. They've done this repeatedly. And if you tell a lie for long enough, it begins to take on the semblance of truth. That's what's been happening. There is no shred of evidence that suggests fundamentalism on the part of General Buhari. There's no shred of evidence.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yemio Shibajo in 2014. I started the program by talking about an infallible truth. I then reflected on an interview granted to the Vanguard by Chief Olu Falai. It then reminded me that one UNISA was mobbed in Bauchi last month on grounds of blasphemy. He is no more. That reminds me too of Deborah Samuel, mobbed in the College of Education in Sokoto 3 years ago. The death of Deborah in the hands of religious fanatics is a continuation of a trend that has existed in Nigeria over time. It still exists. It will not stop because the social structures that enables it are still solid. Let me take you back. In November 2002, Isioma Daniel of This Day newspaper wrote an opinion piece in support of the planned Miss World Beauty pageant to be hosted in Abuja in November of that year. Agbani Derego had won the 2001 contest, providing Nigeria the global attention that culminated in the granting to the country the hosting right for the next edition. Before the publication of the article, there had been strong opposition to the hosting of the event in Nigeria by a section of the Muslim population, majority of them from the north. This period also coincided with the time states in the northwest were promoting and making Sharia a state law. In her article, Isioma Daniel mentioned that Prophet Muhammad would have approved of the pageants and would have taken a wife from the contestants. This part of the article led to angry demonstrations in some cities of the north. It provoked a storm in Kaduna, leading to the death of many. A Human Rights Watch report says around 250 persons were killed. These days' publication and the reactions that followed explains the condition in the north today. You would ask, why did Isioma Daniel even choose to make that publication? She would be in the best position to answer. But the many killings on grounds of religion and ethnicity has exposed the north and Nigeria to violence. So the north is now the hotbed of death, and the south is emulating it very fast. This is connected to the social condition the people have exposed themselves to, a condition that grows poverty and frustrates education. A place like Kaduna pays dearly for it. Despite the large number of military facilities in Kaduna State, bandits and violence have grabbed the throat of that state, squeezing it aggressively and wanting it dead. El-Rufai explained and explained. His predecessor is still explaining. Let Omololu Olunloyo, a former governor of the old Oyo State, take us into politics and the north. Then I'll come to wrap up the show.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
How come the Americans knew that Nigeria might fizzle to an end in 2015?
Do you believe them?
No, one did not believe them when they said so many years back. But it's looking progressively so.
Are you scared?
I am scared. Why should they say it 5 years beforehand? Thomas Pickering was eliminated. He was around.
So you see a conspiracy?
Yes, there is some. Some people don't like this country being very strong, and there's a conspiracy somewhere.
We can think ahead
We
and
can.
outsmart them.
We can if we are united. The Yorubas are not united. The Igbos are not united. There is a lot of bad blood between Igbo and Yoruba, exacerbated by Chinwa's latest books, and then the North is not the monolith that it used to be. In fact, one of the more independent and more quiet corners was the Kanemi Empire. That's where, surprisingly, we're having a lot of this trouble. And then there are things I don't fathom well, which I don't think. Jonathan said
And I think now one will see that he was right. He must have got his facts. That they have infiltrated his cabinet.
And they are striking every day.
They are striking every day. And they are striking in a way that confuses people. But I don't think it's a religious war. I don't think it's a religious war. I think there is political discontent. There is economic discontent. There is something about the North, which I must say on this program. Some of the richest people in Nigeria, absolutely richest people, I'm not talking of the Forbes list, which is actually a bogus list to an extent. The Forbes list is first of all bogus because it doesn't contain politicians. Maybe the richest person in this country may be somebody who has taken political office. All the people whose names they have written, maybe save Danjuma or something, have never taken any public office and so on. You get the point I'm making. They didn't include politicians. They included people in transportation, cement, telecommunications, and so on. In the North, you have some of the absolutely richest people in this country. And they are very few. And at the same time, in that same North, you have the largest masses of the poorest people. 90-something plus.
Is the North a time bomb?
Yes. You will find in Borno a man, I just give a name because the man is dead, a man called Maideribe. And probably he owns half of what everybody owns in Borno. And oil and gas of the Niger Delta. And there's a lot of secret about oil and gas. You can always do a documentary on Oloibiri and see what it is now and what it was in 1957.
Corruption sings with a sonorous voice in your country.
Seriously, and wastage is the name of the country. So there is something wrong where you have just about 10, 12 extremely, stinkingly, criminally rich people in a part of the country where the Almajiris constitute more than 90%.
Should we restructure Nigeria?
Nigeria has to be restructured.
Should we go back to the regional system?
We should go back to the regional system and, if possible, parliamentary system.
Is anybody going to listen to Omodolu Olunloyo?
They are not likely to listen. They want more and more states where they will have more and more governors and more deputy governors.
Do you see corruption growing in this system?
The corruption will grow, I think, until the country collapses.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Corruption will grow until the country collapses. That's from Omodolu Olunloyo, a former governor of your state. I had that interview with him in 2012. 12 years after that interview, the North is no longer a time bomb. It has already exploded. Because 12 years ago, I asked, is the North a time bomb? He said yes. I brought back that interview because Olunloyo is a deep thinker. So you can see. So he said Nigeria will collapse. Will it collapse? Will you allow it to collapse? This is one of the most powerful books anybody can read. It's a small book, but very powerful. How much land does a man need? It's a philosophical book. It's a philosophical book. For some time, we've not been selling the book. We've been giving out the book. That is why you can't see it on State Affairs. We've been giving it out in the last 4 years to affect people's mind. Our campaign for mental revolution. But we are not giving it out anymore. We have given out more than enough copies. So you can get your copies now. You see the book? How much land does a man need? It's a philosophical book. The point is that, what is it? Why? Why do you want to grab everything? He kept grabbing and kept grabbing. You know what happened? He collapsed. Ululoyo said, we'll keep grabbing, right? Until the state collapses. If you read this book, something will happen to your mind. Small, beautiful book by Leo Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy. How much land does a man need? Contact us on WhatsApp and you get your copy. To build a nation that serves the common good, the minds of the citizens must be elevated. We must avoid the situation where each person becomes an island, where religion is hate, and where civic virtue, honesty, and respect of authority decline. As you can see, our society is a place where conspiracies are rampant, and government has become a theater of powerful men and women conniving to wreak havoc on the larger population. It is a state where economic inequality is on the rise, where indolence and luxury undermine the social fabric, where virtue is on a rapid decline and greed reigns supreme. In this system, enforcement of law becomes weak and is compromised. Unless there is a renewal of the mind, a renewal of the civil order, even prudent statesmanship would find it hard to stem the tide towards the present degeneration and decay. The result is doom, and the undeclared civil war becomes a declared one. A word is enough for the wise. I am Edmund Obilo. Thank you for listening.